Welcome back to my channel for more spine-chilling tales. Today I've collected terrifying true stories from real people. If you're new, please subscribe, like, and comment. Your support helps me bring you more stories. Now close your eyes, turn off the lights, and listen to these nightmare-inducing experiences. I didn't think I was the kind of person who would post roommate needed ASAP, quiet clean, no drama, on Craigslist, but rent went up, my hours went down, and a spreadsheet said I had 6 weeks before my savings hit zero. I took the photos, wrote the ad, and promised myself I'd screen hard. Meet in public, check ID, first month plus deposit, references. I even made a little checklist on my phone. He answered the same night. The reply was short. Saw your ad. I can move in this weekend. I work nights. Don't talk much. I pay cash. No emojis. No questions. His name in the email was Evan, and he suggested we meet at a coffee shop on the corner the next day. I told him noon. He replied with a thumbs up. When he walked in, I recognized him immediately. Black cap pulled low, disposable mask still on even though the city mandate had ended months earlier. He kept his sunglasses on until he sat, then slid them up onto the brim of the cap. Pale, clean-shaven, average height. He set a small spiral notebook on the table and pointed to his throat, then scribbled, "Laryngitis. Text better?" I nodded, a little thrown, and we proceeded like that. Me talking quietly, him writing single words. He handed me a photocopy of a driver's license. The name matched. Evan, late 20s. The address wasn't local. When I asked about references, he wrote temp contracts, then night janitorial, followed by a shrug. He slid a bank envelope across the table with the exact amount of first month plus deposit in clean 20s. I can move Saturday, he wrote. He never asked to see the room first. That should have been my first stop sign. I stuck to my rules anyway. I sent him a simple rental agreement, set a time for a walkthrough, told him the building manager needed his ID for the file. He nodded and texted, okay. No punctuation. Saturday, he showed with one carry-on suitcase, a folded gray blanket, and a plastic tote. No bed frame, no lamp, no posters. He didn't ask about parking, laundry, bus lines, any of the things people usually ask. He walked in the spare room, looked at the window once, then at the closet, then at the smoke detector. He slid his sunglasses back down and gave me a thumbs up. That night was the first time I heard the pacing. Our apartment is a narrow railroad layout. Living room to kitchen to hall to 2 bedrooms. The floors are old oak, loud when you cross them. Around 2 a.m., a steady rhythm started from his room. 5 slow steps, pause, 5 slow steps back. Over and over, like the tick of a metronome. It went on for 2 hours. I chalked it up to jet lag or night shift schedule and stuffed pillows over my ears. Week 1, he was unfailingly polite without ever actually speaking. He nodded hello, texted when his shower was free, and left his cashier utilities in a labeled envelope on the counter every Sunday. He washed his dishes immediately, wiped the counter, and lined his shoes parallel by the door. He never cooked, just ate granola straight from the bag and drank bottled water. He lived like someone who planned to vanish any minute. He also never removed the mask. Inside, alone, he slept in it. I know because I eventually started cracking my door at night to see if the pacing would stop if he thought I was listening. It didn't. Weird things began to add up. The peephole on the front door felt greasy one morning. I wiped it and found a translucent film stuck over the lens, like the kind you peel off a new phone. I took it off and tossed it. That night, the peephole was covered again, this time with the tiniest circle of black tape dead center. I sent a photo to our building group chat asking if anyone had ideas about prank kids. No one did. He hated when the news was on. If I was watching and a live segment started, he would appear in the doorway, tilt his head, and hold a finger to the mask. Shh. Then pick up the remote and mute it without asking. If I unmuted it, he'd walk back to his room and close the door. The pacing would start. I told myself it was quirks. Night workers get odd. Silent retreat people exist. Maybe he had anxiety about showing his face. Maybe he had scars. Maybe he was just shy. I called my older brother and said all of this out loud. He told me to trust my gut and buy a door wedge. I bought two. The first genuine jolt came from the landlord. Our building manager, Denise, is one of those no-nonsense women who keeps a clipboard and knows every tenant's dog's name. She knocked one afternoon while I was working from home and peered over my shoulder past me. "You got a new roommate?" she asked, pen poised. "Yeah," I said. "Evan. I added him to the file last week. I emailed you a copy of his ID and the month one paperwork." Denise frowned, flipped pages, then pulled a printed email from her pocket. "I got the email," she said. "That's why I'm here. I tried the number you wrote for him, and it just rings." And she glanced at the paper again. "Someone stopped by this morning asking if Evan still lived here." "That's him," I said too quickly. She shook her head. "Not him. An older lady. Said she was his mother. Said he went missing in March, and the police took a report. She was checking any address he might have used." Denise tapped the photocopied ID. "This address here is in Oregon." She said he never lived there. Said he never had a driver's license. I felt my face go hot. "You sure it was the same name?" Denise met my eyes. I wrote it down as she spelled it. "Same last name, too." She lowered her voice. "I'm not telling you what to do, but you should be careful." That night, the pacing started early. 5 steps. Pause. 5 steps. I could not hear it. I texted him from my room. "Hey, building manager said someone came by looking for you? Your mom? Everything okay?" He didn't answer. The pacing continued. 30 minutes later, a note slid under my door in neat block letters. "No visitors for me. Please ignore. Sorry about pacing. Hard to sleep nights." I texted, "Can we talk in person tomorrow?" Nothing. In the morning, the note was gone. I started to look for reasons to be out: late grocery runs, long walks. When I was home, I noticed more details I'd ignored. The bathroom mirror had a faint fog print, like a forehead pressed hard to it. The hall smoke detector had its battery missing. The tiny red camera on our router, which blinks when it streams, was covered with a dot of beige putty. The blinds, which I normally tilted up for light, were always snapped slat down as soon as I left the room. One Saturday, I went to my parents for the afternoon. I texted him, "Out for the day," and got no reply. On the drive back, I had an intrusive thought I couldn't shake. What if he was in my room right then, going through my stuff? When I unlocked the door, the apartment smelled faintly like bleach. My bedroom looked normal until I opened my top dresser drawer. I keep 3 things there: passport, social security card, and a little envelope with emergency cash. All 3 were present, but the edges of the envelope were beyond straight, like someone had squared them with a ruler. I bought 2 small Bluetooth trackers, the coin-size kind meant for keys, and taped one under my bed slat and the other inside the cover of my journal. If those moved out of my room, my phone would alert me. I also set up the old laptop's webcam facing my door and ran free motion detector software. It felt paranoid. It also felt like the only adult thing I could do without hand-waving it all away. 2 nights later, just after 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with the alert: "Tracker out of range." The one under the bed. I was half asleep. I slid the door wedge into place, sat up, and listened. The pacing had stopped. I waited, heart hammering. The wedge flexed with the softest pressure from the hall side. Whoever was there didn't knock. The pressure eased, returned, then eased again, testing. A minute of quiet passed. Then the kitchen faucet squeaked on, ran 10 seconds, squeaked off. The fridge door opened. The fridge door closed. The wedge stayed pressed under my door until dawn. He never tried again. In the morning, the tracker pinged back in range. I opened my door to an empty hall and walked to the living room. He was sitting perfectly upright on the couch, mask on, cap low, hands folded on his knees. He raised one palm in a slow hello. On the coffee table, my tracker lay on a napkin, the adhesive tape neatly peeled away from its side like skin from an orange. I swallowed. "Did you need something from my room last night?" I asked, startling myself at how steady my voice sounded. He didn't move, didn't blink. Then he slid his notebook forward without touching it. A single line was written there. "No." Something in me snapped then. Not brave, just tired. "Take the mask off," I said. He didn't. "Take it off," I said again louder. "Please." He reached up with 2 fingers, touched the elastic, and paused. He wasn't trembling. I realized I was. "You He shook his head slowly. Then he stood, picked up the notebook, and walked to his room. The door shut. The lock clicked. I left for work early and called a non-emergency police line for my car. I told them what I had: the missing person possibility, the peephole tape, the router putty, the 3 a.m. door pressure, the tracker. The operator took notes and told me, very calmly, that without a crime it was hard to initiate, but if I felt unsafe I could leave, and they'd send an officer to do a welfare check. I asked them to. Then I called Denise. She met the officers at my door an hour later. I watched from my car across the street with the window barely cracked. I saw the conversation at the threshold. I saw my roommate, hood up, mask on, sunglasses, appear, notebook in hand. He wrote, showed it to them. He pointed to his throat. I saw one of the officers tilt his head at the smoke detector, then at the front door camera dot, then at the router. He stepped to the side and said something I couldn't hear. The other officer asked for ID. My roommate produced the same photocopy he'd given me. The officer asked for the original. After a long pause, my roommate closed the door, disappeared, and returned empty-handed. He wrote again, showed them. The officer shook his head. They stepped inside. 5 minutes passed. 10. My phone buzzed, Denise texting, hold on. Then a second text. You're going to want to talk to them. I walked back over. When I rounded the landing into the hall, the first thing I saw was my roommate's open door. Inside, his bed was perfectly made. The suitcase was under the frame. The closet had exactly 3 shirts hanging, evenly spaced, and 1 pair of slacks. On the shelf, a shoebox with a label maker strip. Supplies. The officer had opened it. Inside were the things I recognized from my own drawers. A spare house key. I didn't know I lost my old college ID. A roll of that same beige putty. A suction cup mirror hook. A set of tiny screwdrivers. And a strip of round black stickers the exact size of the router camera LED. There were also things I didn't recognize. 3 other apartment keys on a ring. A cradle of blank key cards. And a plastic zip sleeve of laminate pouches. Is this yours? The officer asked, holding up my old ID. Yes, I said. I thought I threw that out years ago. The officer nodded toward the bed. We found a flash drive taped under the slat, he said. Do you know about that? I shook my head. The other officer walked out of my room holding a second flash drive between 2 gloved fingers. Under your bed too, he said. They asked my roommate to sit on the couch. He complied without a sound. When they asked again for a valid ID, he wrote, lost. They asked his mother's phone number. He wrote a number, then crossed it out and wrote a second. The first officer dialed. A woman answered. He put on speaker. Ma'am, the officer said, this is Officer Klein with the city police. We're with someone who says he's your son. Is your son named Evan? A beat. Then the woman, no. My son's name isn't Evan. He's been missing since March. Who is this? The officer covered the phone and looked at my roommate. Your name? He asked. My roommate sat very still. Then he stood, slow as if moving underwater, and pointed to his throat again. He wrote, I can't. The officer ended the call and cuffed him without a struggle. They told him he wasn't under arrest, but was being detained until they could verify identity. When they stood him up, he wobbled once. His mask shifted, and I saw the edge of something like medical glue under his jawline. A second later, I realized what it was, a patch of synthetic skin the shape of a beard he didn't have. The mask hid it. They took him in a patrol car. Denise sat me at my table and poured water into a mug I hadn't washed. She looked older than she had at noon. I've been doing this 20 years, she said. That's a first. 2 days later, the detective called. The flash drives had footage. Your apartment, he said, and 3 others in town. The peephole had been outfitted with a reversible device, what looked like a little clear lens cover that could film both sides of the door. The router camera was covered to force me to lower my guard. There was a file of sleeping people. The detective didn't describe mine, but I knew. The pacing at night matched the timestamps. 3:15 to 4 every night, like a ritual. The ID he showed me belonged to a real Evan from a state away, but the portrait had been altered. The man in my apartment had a different legal name they were still working to verify. He had warrants for breaking and entering and possession of burglary tools. He had rented rooms before under other names, stayed a month or 2, and vacuumed people's lives without ever raising his voice. In one building, the original tenant, moved away and never contacted anyone again. That case was now getting fresh eyes. Why the silence? I asked. 2 reasons, the detective said. 1, most people won't push a mute person. 2, if no one ever hears your voice, no one ever recognizes it later. It makes witness statements useless. He asked me to come down and see if I could identify anything else from the box. I went. I recognized the notebook. On the first page was a neat inventory of my place, written like a grocery list. Front door, chain weak, replace. Router, LED cover. Peephole, good thread. Spare key, likely in bowl. Night noises mask. Use sink, fridge. Tenant, works hybrid, alone afternoons. The last line was underlined. I moved out 2 weeks later. People kept telling me I was brave for staying those last days, but it didn't feel like bravery. It felt like triage, packing, scrubbing, leaving no forwarding address on the door. Denise helped me carry boxes. On my final trip, she handed me the old door wedge I'd forgot in a kitchen drawer. You keep this, she said. Even if your next place is brand new and bright and nothing like this, you keep it. I do. It sits by the door in the new apartment like a superstition. When I catch myself late at night listening for that 5-step rhythm, I remind myself I have locks and alarms and 100 small rules now. I don't post public ads anymore. I ask for video calls. I verify IDs with the state database. I trust the feeling I get when something moves in the corner of a room and the air goes thin. Every so often, I still get an email from an unfamiliar address with one line. Room still available? I don't answer. I don't know if it's him or one of the others like him. People who want to live inside your life without leaving fingerprints. I only know how close I came to letting the lock click behind me and believing that silence meant safety. It never did. If you've ever moved in a hurry, you know that free, if you can haul it, is like a magic spell. It was a Tuesday night, rent was due on Friday, and my living room still looked like a waiting room. 2 camping chairs and a milk crate for a coffee table. I wasn't looking for anything fancy. I just wanted a couch I could crash on after work. Craigslist had a fresh post. Free sectional. No rips, non-smoker. Moving tomorrow. First come, first served. The photos looked decent. Gray fabric, low profile, shades on the left. The location pinged a neighborhood 8 minutes from me. I messaged the number and got a reply within 2 minutes. Yes, still here. Please come tonight. I'm at the loading alley behind the building. Easier to carry. I should have paused at loading alley. Instead, I lifted my dolly into the trunk, grabbed 2 ratchet straps, and texted my upstairs neighbor to help. He was game for a slice of pizza and a favor. The alley was narrow with brick walls on both sides. A roll-up door was already open, and a man stood by the sectional, the pieces stacked neatly on a moving blanket. Middle-aged, ball cap, work gloves, no small talk. He said, "You'll need 2 trips unless you've got a pickup," then immediately bent to grab one end. He moved like someone who carried furniture for a living. No grunting, no drama, just angles and leverage. We got the main piece into my neighbor's SUV and the chaise into my car. The guy wouldn't take cash, wouldn't take water, wouldn't give a name. "Just happy it's gone," he said. "We're out by sunrise." 2 trips later, my living room finally looked like a living room. The couch was heavier than it looked, but solid. I vacuumed, sprayed it with fabric sanitizer, threw on a blanket, and collapsed into it with a slice. It smelled faintly like cologne and laundry soap. I remember thinking, score? Around 1 a.m., the scratching started. At first it sounded like the wall, old pipes, or a tree branch. Then it localized. It was coming from the couch itself. A soft, persistent scritch near the right armrest. I sat up. The sound stopped. I lay back down. Scritch. I told myself mouse. I lived on the first floor. It wasn't unheard of. Still, mouse in a couch was not a problem I'd ever had. I slid my phone flashlight along the seams. The underside of the couch was covered in the usual thin black dust cover cloth, stapled tight. No obvious holes, no droppings. I pressed the fabric. The sound stopped. When I took my hand away, it started again like whatever was inside had regained its nerve. "Okay," I said out loud to no one. "Tomorrow." By morning the scratching had stopped. I yanked the couch out from the wall and tipped it forward onto the carpet. The dust cover was very intact, too intact. The staples along the perimeter were brand new, shiny, and driven in perfectly spaced intervals like someone with a pneumatic gun had done it that week. Most old couches have a few missing staples, or at least a sag in the cloth. This looked factory fresh. I ran my palm over the dust cover. A rigid shape pressed back at me from inside, rectangular, not part of any frame. When I hit it lightly with my knuckles, it made a dull plastic thud, not wood. That was the first moment my brain moved from mouse to why is there a plastic box inside my free couch. I grabbed a box cutter and hesitated. If it was a rodent nest, I was about to have the worst morning. If it was a stash, drugs, cash, whatever, I was about to inherit someone else's problem. Either way, cutting seemed better than pretending ignorance. I sliced a small L-shaped flap near the rigid area and peeled back the fabric. Inside the cavity, nestled between the springs and frame, was a black plastic project box about the size of a paperback, zip-tied to a metal crossbar. Two thin wires ran out of it toward the armrest. Next to it sat a rectangular battery pack, a power bank with a short USB cable plugged in. The power bank had one LED glowing solid blue. Above the crossbar, tucked into the underside of the armrest, a small hole had been drilled through the frame. The hole lined up with one of the tufted buttons on the couch's arm, one of those fabric-covered circles you barely notice. Except this one wasn't a button. From the inside, I could see a tiny black eye, a pinhole camera lens, glued into the tuft. My mouth went dry. On instinct, I recorded a video on my phone. I narrated the date and time, showed the couch, the cut I made, the battery pack, the lens. I didn't yank anything yet, just documented. The box had two little slot covers, one labeled SIM, one labeled SD. The SIM slot was empty. The SD slot had a micro SD card snapped flush inside. I traced the other wire. It led to a little wafer-thin rectangle taped to the underside of the armrest, a PIR motion sensor, the same kind you see in cheap alarm kits. The camera was pointed at my living room, directly facing my TV and front door. If I sat on the couch, it would be looking slightly over my shoulder. I sat back on my heels and stared at it. There are moments where fear arrives as a thought, not a feeling. Mine was, I slept here last night. I didn't touch the card or the wiring. I unplugged the USB cable from the power bank to kill the juice, then set the couch gently down and backed away like it could bite. The man's number from the alley was still in my messages. I texted, "Hey, found electronics inside the couch you gave me. Not cool. Call me." The message sent. No response. I called the non-emergency police line. It felt like overkill even as I dialed, but I couldn't think of a smarter move. The dispatcher listened, then said, "Please don't disassemble anything further. If you can wait at your location, an officer will come take a look." 2 patrol officers arrived within 15 minutes. I showed them the video first, then the couch. One crouched and whistled under his breath. "That's not home theater wiring," he said. The other put on gloves and took photos. They asked if I touched the SD card. I told them no. They asked about the seller. I gave them the alley, the description, the number. "Do you mind if our property crimes detective takes this?" the first officer asked. "We'll need the couch as evidence. We'll provide a receipt." I laughed because it was absurd. 30-something me finally gets a couch, immediately donates it to the police. But I nodded. They asked me to text them the Craigslist link. When I opened the app, the post was gone. Deleted by author. I had taken screenshots. I sent those. They carried the couch out like it was a bomb. My neighbor, who'd helped me pick it up, stood in the doorway, eyebrows somewhere near his hairline. "So, pizza tonight?" he said. "For pizza," I said. "No seating." By afternoon, the detective called. He introduced himself, used my video as a reference, and asked me to come down to the station with my phone for a quick copy of the footage. He was calm in a way that made me calmer. "We see versions of this," he said. "You did the right thing not digging the card out. Can I ask, have you had anyone unusual around your building today?" I thought about the alley guy, how quickly he moved, how little he'd said. I looked out my window. A white van idled partway down the block, unmarked. The driver was looking at his phone. People use white vans for a lot of innocent reasons, I told myself, even as my heart thudded. I don't know, I said. Maybe. Let us swing a patrol by, he said. Just a drive-through. That night, I couldn't settle. I kept glancing at the place where the couch had been like it might still be there, watching. I scrapped my plan to sleep on the chaise. They'd taken that, too, since the tufted arm matched. I pushed my bed against the far wall and jammed a chair under the doorknob because a door wedge felt like a paper wish. My phone buzzed in the morning. It was the detective. They pulled the SD card and cloned it. There are multiple folders, he said. Some appear to be from other locations. Living rooms, bedrooms. But there are also installer photos, shots from beneath showing serial numbers, the angle of the lens, notes like aim 17 degrees downward, test motion. Whoever did this documents his own work. Mine, I asked. The words scraped my throat. Yours has one file, he said. Motion triggered at 2:06 a.m. No image, just a 2-second black recording. Looks like the lens booted, but didn't write, maybe from low voltage. The battery was full when we got it, so he might have swapped in a fresh pack before giving it away. I sat down. My coffee went cold in my hand. Do you know who he is? We're working on it, the detective said. We have the phone number, the alley location, and he appeared on a nearby doorbell camera. We've matched similar posts, free couches or free dressers. In the last 2 months, all removed within 24 hours, all from the same cellular block. There's also a pattern in the hardware. The project box and the power banks are off the shelf, but the pinhole mounts are custom. We've seen that exact epoxy work before. So this is a thing? I asked, half expecting him to say this was all some elaborate prank. It's a thing, he said, not unkindly. Sometimes it's just voyeurism. Sometimes it's casing, watch schedules, entry points when people are asleep. The free item gets the installer inside your home with your help. You bring his gear through your own door. I thought about the alley, the way he'd insisted on helping carry, how he'd guided the heavier piece in and out of doorways like he'd done it 1,000 times. I thought about how I'd thanked him. The detective asked me to come down to look at a photo lineup of similar vans from the alley cameras. When I arrived, he showed me a freeze frame. My neighbor's SUV half in the frame, me in a hoodie on the curb. In the deep background, a man's silhouette in the roll-up doorway, cap pulled low. It wasn't enough to ID, but it was something. He flipped to another image, a pinhole lens installed inside a dresser knob. Another, inside a smoke detector. Another, the hollow of a bedpost finial. My skin crawled in a slow, full-body wave. Will you let me know if... I started, then stopped. I didn't know how to end that sentence. If what? If I'm on someone's server? If he knows my address? If he comes back for what he thinks is his? We'll let you know, he said. In the meantime, document any unusual vehicles. Don't engage if someone comes by asking for the couch back. And if you see any new free listings using similar photos, send them to me. We're tracking the pattern. The next week felt like living under a glass dome. Everything was the same, but I watched it from the angle someone else would see. My front door, my blinds, the fact that my toothbrush was always left at the same tilt. I put tape over my laptop camera and told myself it was temporary. I moved my router into my bedroom and set up a new one for the living room with the camera LED drilled out from the inside, so no little sticker could hide it. 3 weeks later, the detective called back. They'd executed a warrant on a storage unit rented under a burner name, but paid in cash by the same person who'd sold the free items. Inside, they found a plastic bin filled with identical project boxes, a stapler with the same gauge staples as my dust cover, and a roll of the same black fabric. They also found a notebook with addresses and a sketch of my living room that made my stomach drop. Front door here, couch here, camera line here. Is he arrested? I asked. Not yet, the detective said. The unit was vacated 2 days before. We have video of someone loading a van. Face never shows, but we're working on a plate fragment. We'll be in touch. I wanted a clean ending. I wanted him in cuffs on the nightly news, the word busted in big letters. Instead, I got quiet updates. Another victim identified, another hardware match, a city 2 hours away with the same epoxy signature, a person of interest who didn't return to his job. My couch was now labeled evidence. It might sit in a warehouse for a year. I slept on a borrowed futon and stared at the space where my sectional had been like a missing tooth. There was one more thing. 2 months after the couch, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "Did the sectional fit through your door okay?" I froze, took a screenshot, and forwarded it to the detective. Then I blocked the number. 30 seconds later, my neighbor knocked to ask if I wanted a beer on the stoop. I said yes. We sat outside until the mosquitoes started biting, watching the street go from gold to blue to dark, talking about nothing and everything like being out there could anchor me back to normal. Here's what I learned, and I only learned it the hard way because I'm stubborn and cheap. Free isn't free if you don't know where it came from. If the underside fabric looks brand new with perfect staples, ask why. If a stranger insists on using the back alley and moves too fast, slow them down. Film your finds before you touch them. You don't have to be a detective, but you can help one. And if your furniture starts scratching in the middle of the night, listen. It might not be a mouse. I still use Craigslist. I'm not going to pretend I don't, but I meet in daylight. I bring someone. I inspect the underside of everything. I ask to pick up from the front door, not an alley. If the seller pushes me around small decisions, I walk away. Sometimes I think about the folders on that micro SD card. The living rooms I'll never recognize, the people who set up their brand new free couch, put on a movie, and never knew they weren't alone. I was lucky. I could have flapped, killed the battery, and made a phone call. It could have been months of being watched, or worse, my place on a list. The space where the sectional sat is still empty. I haven't replaced it yet. I told myself I'm waiting for a deal, but that's not the reason. The truth is simpler. I'm not ready to sit there with my back to the room and forget to be afraid. Maybe I don't have to forget. Maybe remembering is the point. I was 16 the first time I ever babysat for someone outside of my family. It was through a Craigslist ad. Looking back, that should have been the first red flag. The ad was short and strange. Overnight babysitter needed. Easy job. Cash payment. Must be reliable and discreet. One child. No phone interview, no background check, just an address, a time, and a promise of $150 for the night. At 16, $150 sounded like a fortune. My friends worked whole weekends at coffee shops for less. So I emailed back, and within an hour I got a reply. The message was short. Be at the house by 8 p.m. Don't bring guests. Don't go into the basement. We'll be home around 6 a.m. I told myself rich people were just weird. The address was in an older neighborhood I didn't know well, a cluster of tall, narrow houses pressed shoulder to shoulder. First impressions. The place was dimly lit when I got there, and a man in a dark coat answered the door. He was tall, with deep circles under his eyes. He didn't smile. "This is easy," he said, handing me an envelope already stuffed with cash. "She's upstairs. Just keep her safe. Don't let her stay up too late." He didn't introduce me to his wife. He didn't even give me his name. I walked into the living room, expecting toys, maybe a TV running cartoons. But the house was unnervingly bare. No photos on the walls. No scattered stuffed animals. No evidence a child lived there at all. Upstairs, the child's room looked staged, like it had been decorated quickly to look like a kid's space. A single doll sat on a shelf. A bed was made too perfectly. The only toy was a small wooden rocking horse in the corner. But there was no child. The missing child. I went downstairs again, thinking maybe the girl was with her parents. But the man was already pulling on his coat by the door. "She's shy," he muttered. "You'll hear her if she needs something." And then he left. Just like that. I stood in the hallway, confused. The house was dead quiet. No laughter, no footsteps upstairs, no voices. After an hour, I called up the stairs softly. "Hello, do you want to come down?" I brought a snack. Silence. That's when I noticed the baby monitor on the kitchen counter. It was old, yellowing plastic with a cracked antenna. The red light was on. I picked it up, pressed it to my ear. At first, just static, then a faint sound. Breathing. Strange noises. I sat on the couch with the monitor in my lap. Every few minutes, there was the faint creak of the rocking horse upstairs. Then quiet. Then a little laugh. I wanted to believe it was just the kid playing, but I hadn't seen her once. Around midnight, the static grew louder. The breathing turned into whispers, fast, urgent, words I couldn't make out. I muted the monitor, my heart pounding. Maybe the toy was interfering, I told myself. Or maybe the parents had set up some weird prank camera. But then I heard it with my own ears. Upstairs, a child's footsteps running across the floor. The laughter. I gathered my courage and went upstairs. The hallway was darker than before, the only light coming from the cracked door of the child's room. Inside, the bed was still perfectly made. The doll sat in the same place. The rocking horse was still, but I swear I heard giggling right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I turned back, and the doll was lying on its side now, as if someone had just knocked it over. Things escalate. By 2 a.m., the noises grew constant. Small hands drumming on the walls. Soft singing that seemed to echo through the vents. I locked myself in the living room, clutching the monitor. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the monitor came alive. Not whispers this time. A girl's voice, clear and sharp. "Why are you in my house?" My throat went dry. I'm babysitting," I stammered, as if she could hear me. The voice giggled. "You're not supposed to be here." And then the line went dead. The basement. I remembered the warning from the man. Don't go into the basement. Which, of course, made me desperate to look. I found the door by the kitchen. It was padlocked from the outside. I tugged once, twice. Locked tight. But as I turned away, I heard it. From beneath the door. Knocking. 3 slow knocks, like someone trapped down there. The final hours. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, lights blazing, staring at the clock. Every creak in the house made my skin crawl. At 5:45 a.m., just before dawn, the noises stopped. No more laughter. No more footsteps. Just silence, like the house had finally exhaled. At 6 a.m. sharp, the man came back. His coat looked dustier than before. His eyes were bloodshot. "Everything okay?" he asked flatly. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers. But I just nodded and handed him the monitor. He smiled then for the first time all night. "Good. She likes you." I took my money and left without another word. Aftermath. I never saw a child that night. Not once. 2 weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched the address online. The house had been listed for sale 6 years earlier, advertised as a fixer-upper after a tragic accident. The former owners? A couple who'd lost their only daughter in a fall down the basement stairs. The ad never mentioned anyone moving in after. I was 22 when I moved into the cheapest apartment I could find. Fresh out of college, working a dead-end office job, I didn't have much choice. The ad sounded too good to be true. First month free. Utilities included. Must sign 1-year lease. The place was in an old brick building at the edge of town, tucked between an abandoned laundromat and a boarded-up diner. My friends told me I was crazy, but I told myself it was temporary, just until I saved up enough to move somewhere better. First impressions. When I first walked in, I noticed how clean it was. Almost too clean. White walls freshly painted, floors that looked newly polished. The landlord, a thin man with greasy hair, handed me the keys without much conversation. "You'll hear things sometimes," he said with a shrug. "Old pipes. Don't worry about it." I asked about neighbors. He smirked. "You're the only tenant on this floor. It's quiet here." That should have been comforting. It wasn't. The first night, I unpacked a mattress on the floor and tried to sleep. Around midnight, I woke to what sounded like footsteps above me. Slow, dragging footsteps. But the landlord had said I was the only tenant. I told myself maybe he lived upstairs. Maybe I misheard. I buried my head under the pillow and forced myself back to sleep. Strange happenings. Over the next week, the noises became routine. Every night between midnight and 3 a.m., I'd hear them. Footsteps pacing, doors creaking open and shut, faint whispers that bled through the walls. Once I even heard laughter. A woman's laugh, high-pitched and mocking, drifting down from above me. But when I checked the stairwell the next morning, the floor above was sealed off. The door was locked with a heavy chain. Dust coated the steps as if no one had walked there in years. The hallway encounter. One night, coming home late from work, I saw someone standing at the end of the hallway. It was a woman in a pale nightgown, her hair long and tangled, her face shadowed. She was barefoot, her feet dirty as though she'd walked miles. "Do you live here?" I asked, clutching my grocery bag tighter. She didn't answer. She just turned and walked toward the chain door at the stairwell. When she reached it, she passed straight through, like the door wasn't even there. I dropped the groceries and ran into my apartment, slamming the door shut behind me. The photograph. A few days later, I was digging through the kitchen drawers, hoping to find something left behind, maybe utensils or a spare key. Instead, I found a photograph. It was of the very hallway outside my door, but from decades earlier. The wallpaper was different, and the lights had an old-fashioned design. In the center of the photo stood a woman in a nightgown, the same woman I'd seen. Her eyes were wide, almost terrified. Behind her, if I looked closely, I could see a faint shape. A man, his hand on her shoulder. The back of the photo had a date, 1974. Sleepless nights. After that, sleep became impossible. Every night, the noises intensified. It wasn't just footsteps anymore. It was scratching at my door, whispers right outside my room, the rattle of the chain on the upstairs door. Sometimes, the doorknob would turn slowly, like someone was trying to come in. I started keeping the lights on all night. The electricity was included in the rent, so I figured, why not? But even the brightness didn't help when I saw shadows moving across the walls with no source. The landlord's warning. Finally, I confronted the landlord. I told him about the noises, the woman, the photograph. He went pale, but tried to brush it off. You're imagining things. Old buildings play tricks. I pressed him harder, and at last he sighed. Back in the 70s, there was a tenant upstairs. A young woman. She complained of someone following her, someone in the building no one else could see. One night, the neighbors heard screaming. By the time police arrived, she was gone. No forced entry. No body ever found. Just blood in the hallway. He leaned closer. You got 1 month free because no one lasts longer than that. Breaking point. That night, I decided to leave. I started packing as soon as I got home from work. But around midnight, the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness. The air grew ice cold. And then, from the hallway, came the sound of bare feet slapping against the floor. Closer, closer. The doorknob began to turn. Slow, deliberate. I grabbed my bag and sprinted out the back window, not caring if I broke my ankle jumping down to the alley. I never went back. Aftermath. 2 weeks later, I drove by the building with a friend. The window of my old apartment was open, curtain fluttering. For just a second, I saw her, the woman in the nightgown, standing there, staring down at me. My friend swears the window was empty. I didn't need another camera. I already owned a decent mirrorless and a thrifted point-and-shoot for fun. But the Craigslist post hit every button in my brain. 35mm film camera, works as state clean out, $25, bring cash. The photos showed a beat-up but classic SLR, metal body, 50mm lens, scratches that looked earned, not faked. The seller wrote, found in storage, comes with strap, no guarantees. We met in the parking lot of a supermarket off the highway. He was early, parked nose in with the trunk open like he was giving stuff away. Mid-40s, ball cap, no eye contact. He kept looking past me at the entrance like he was expecting someone else. Here, he said, pressing the camera into my hands. Dry fire it. I popped the back, checked the seals, cracked but serviceable, closed it and fired the shutter. Sounded solid. The lens glass was clean. It was worth $25 just as a shelf piece. You sure about the price? I asked. I'm moving, he said. Take it. I paid. He counted the bills with the trunk between us, then shut it. You a photographer? He asked, like the words tasted bad. More of a hobbyist, I said. I like old stuff. Old stuff likes you back, he said, and then he got in his car and left. I should have loaded a fresh roll right there. Instead, I drove home, set the camera on my kitchen table, and noticed the rewind crank was slightly stiff. When I eased it open, a half-shot roll of film stared back. 36 exposure. Not rewound. Whoever had used it had closed the camera without finishing it. I argue with myself. Ethically, you don't develop strangers' film. Practically, you always do. That's the rule nobody says out loud in thrift shops. If you find a roll, you find a story. I drove to the one lab in town that still did same-day develop if you begged and paid rush. The kid behind the counter raised his eyebrows when he saw the canister. "You okay if we cut it and sleeve it?" he asked. "No prints unless you want them. Quicker that way." "Just scans are fine," I said. He called 2 hours later. "Hey, you want to come in for this one?" he said, voice flattening into neutral. The first image on the monitor was a test shot of kitchen. Not mine. Sunlight, a mug on a counter, a calendar pinned crooked. The second shot was a living room. TV paused on a morning show, shoes by a door, mail on a console. The third was an empty hallway with a runner. Almost all the frames looked like real estate photos, but off. No wide angles, no sense of selling the space. Just documenting. About halfway through the roll, my stomach slid. My living room. Not a living room, my living room. TV on the thrifted console, I couldn't lift alone. Plant on the window ledge that always wilted, the corner of the rug I'd never managed to steam flat. The angle was from the kitchen doorway. The next shot was my bedroom door closed. The next, the edge of my pillow. "What's wrong?" the kid asked, eyes flicking between me and the screen. "These are mine," I said. "This is my apartment." He didn't blink. "You want us to call someone?" I said yes before my brain caught up. The kid took me to the back room and gave me a plastic chair. I watched him call his manager. While he waited, he pulled up the file info. "Shot on ASA 400 stock," he said. "Last frames are a couple weeks old based on the dates. Someone finished the roll recently. Or they left it in the camera." He didn't have to say, "You bought that camera today." 2 uniformed officers showed up, took down the story, asked for the seller's post, his number, where, and when we met. We called it together, straight to voicemail. They asked me not to post about it. They asked for my keys and had me meet them at my apartment. The front door looked normal. The chain was still on because I always use it. Inside, nothing was overtly missing. No sign of forced entry. The officers split up, one checking the bedroom, the other the windows. I stood in the kitchen because that's where the first shot had been taken from, and tried not to be sick. "Anything weird lately?" one asked. "Missing items? Things out of place?" I started to say no, then remembered the peephole lens had felt loose a week ago. I tightened it with my fingers, and the tiny red light on my router, sometimes it was covered. I'd written it off as a sticker falling crooked. I said both. He dragged over a chair and stood on it, peered at the peephole from inside. "There's a thread sleeve in here," he said, half to himself. "Looks like someone swapped a reversible lens. You can film through those from either side." He popped the cover from my router and looked for tape. He found a dot of clear, gummy putty pressed over the camera LED. "It's not high-end," he said, "but it's how you make someone feel safe, kill the blinking." They asked about my locks. Original to the building, 2 deadbolts, no obvious pry marks. "You give a key to anyone?" the other asked. "No," I said. Then I remembered the landlord handyman had replaced the bathroom fan last month while I was at work. He left a tool bag on my floor mat. I texted him to grab it. "He is a master," I said, and the officer nodded like he already knew. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound became the phantom of an earlier sound. I moved the couch an inch and put a single piece of tape between the leg and the floor so I'd know if someone slid it back. I balanced a coin on my bedroom doorknob, the way you see in YouTube videos. I set my phone to record on the kitchen counter aimed at the hallway. It made me feel like I was doing something besides drowning. At 3:22 a.m., my phone vibrated on the wood like a bee. A text from an unknown number. "You got the negatives?" I didn't reply. I forwarded the screenshot to the detective the uniforms had put me in touch with. He wrote back faster than I expected. "Don't engage. We're tracing." A minute later, the unknown number again. "Bring camera back. I'll give you $500. No questions." I typed, "Meet where?" Then deleted it. Then typed, "Wrong number." Then deleted that too. My fingers shook. I put the phone face down. At 3:41 a.m., someone knocked softly at my door. Not the loud bang of cops. A private knock, like someone trying not to wake a roommate. I sat very still on the bed. The coin on the knob didn't move. The knock came again, followed by the soft snick of metal in a cylinder. The sound of a key that didn't quite fit. The chain stopped the door with a 6-inch gap. A face leaned toward the opening. A ball cap, a slice of cheek, an eye that didn't blink. "Hey," a voice whispered, like we were friends. "Hey man, open up. You've got my property." I dialed 911 and hit speaker. The operator's voice filled the room. 911. What is your emergency? The eye flinched, then vanished. Footsteps retreated down the hall. I heard the stairwell door hiss shut. Cops didn't catch him that night. They did pull footage the next day from a dentist office across the street that showed a gray sedan idling at 3:12 a.m. Doors locked, lights off. The license plate was caked with mud. The detective said the seller likely wasn't living in my building, just in my life, orbiting the perimeter. When I met the detective at the lab to look through the rest of the scans, I saw my own kitchen twice more. One with my keys on the counter, one without. A frame of my lock from the inside, taken at night with the flash off. A frame of my bedroom door, the coin on the knob balanced like he was proud of getting in without making it fall. The last frames were of other apartments, or hotel rooms, or daycare waiting areas. Nothing explicit, just a feeling I shouldn't be seeing this. Why sell me the camera? I asked. Pete, the detective said. He felt it. You started changing small things. He might have even seen you at the lab. Dumping the camera dumps risk. Plus, he gets to check who's got his film. If you posted the photos, he could follow the breadcrumb. Is he done with me? I asked. Predators don't finish people, he said. They move on when it's hard. I changed my locks. I asked the landlord for a high-security cylinder and paid for it myself. I bought a cheap wedge alarm that screams if the door opens. I taped the peephole from the inside, except when I'm expecting a delivery. I moved the plant. I started varying my schedule. No more pattern for free. Sometimes on my walk home, I pass the supermarket where I met him. I look at the parking lot and imagine a trunk full of other people's kitchens. I wonder how many of us live like a gallery he can flip through when he's lonely. I'm not naive enough to think I'm invisible now. But the frame he got on my bedroom door, that's the last one he'll ever take. Old stuff likes you back, he'd said. It was the one true thing he told me. The camera found me, yes, but so did the part of me that stopped believing I had nothing a stranger would want. I still shoot film. I develop my own now, in a daylight tank in my kitchen. The first roll I shot after all that was my apartment. Every corner, proof of life for a jury of one. In the last frame, I'm in a mirror, holding the camera like a weapon. The caption in my head is simple. Mine. I thought house sitting would be easy money. Keep the lights on, feed the cat, water the plants. That was all the couple told me when they handed me the keys. I needed the cash, and they were paying well, so I said yes without hesitation. The house was an old Victorian, tucked at the end of a quiet street. From the outside, it looked beautiful. White trim, wide porch, tall windows. Inside, it felt different. Cold, like the air never really warmed up. The first evening went smoothly. I explored the rooms, texted my friends pictures of the old furniture, and laughed about how I felt like I was in a haunted mansion. The cat, a gray tabby named Misty, followed me everywhere, her green eyes watchful. I settled on the couch to watch TV before bed. Around midnight, Misty suddenly bolted upright, ears flat. She stared at the dark hallway that led to the back rooms. "What is it, girl?" I whispered. She hissed, then ran under the couch. I peered down the hallway, but it was empty. I told myself cats got spooked easily. Still, I left a few extra lights on when I went to bed. Footsteps. By the second night, I started hearing things. I was lying in bed upstairs when I heard footsteps on the floor below. Slow, deliberate, like someone pacing. I froze. My phone was charging on the nightstand, and for a moment, I thought about calling the owners. Then I remembered they were on a cruise with no signal. The steps stopped. I forced myself out of bed, crept to the top of the stairs, and looked down. Nothing. Just the dim glow from the lamp I'd left on. I told myself it must have been the house settling. But Misty stayed under the bed all night, refusing to come out. The locked door. On the third day, while watering plants, I noticed a door I hadn't opened before. It was tucked at the far end of the hallway, plain and unmarked. I tried the knob. Locked. That struck me as odd. The owners had told me I could go anywhere except their bedroom. So what was this room? When I pressed my ear against the wood, I thought I heard faint shuffling inside, like fabric moving. I stepped back quickly, heart racing. The whispering. That night, I heard whispering. It started just past 1 a.m. soft but clear, as if two people were talking behind a wall. I sat up in bed, straining to listen. The whispers came from the locked door downstairs. I crept down the steps, the floorboards creaking under my feet. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I reached the door, pressed my ear against it. The voices stopped. I yanked my head back, breathing hard. Misty, crouched at the end of the hall, hissed at the door before darting away. The shadow in the window. The next evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch with my laptop. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement in the upstairs window. I looked up. For a split second, I saw a figure standing there. Tall, unmoving. The problem was, I was supposed to be the only one in the house. I rushed upstairs, my heart pounding, and threw open the door to that room. Empty, but the curtains were still swaying as if someone had just been there. The cat. On my fifth night, Misty disappeared. I searched every corner of the house, calling her name, shaking her food bowl. Nothing. Finally, I heard scratching from behind the locked door. Desperate scratching like claws on wood. Misty, I whispered. The scratching stopped. My stomach dropped. I knew she was too small to make that kind of noise. The door opens. By the sixth night, I was a wreck, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. At 3 a.m., I woke to a loud click. The locked door had swung open on its own. The hallway beyond it was dark. The air pouring out was ice cold, smelling faintly of damp earth. Something moved inside. A tall shadow stepped forward, just enough for me to see its outline. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then Misty shot out of the room, yowling, her fur standing on end. She bolted up the stairs and under my bed. When I looked back, the door was closed again. The owners returned. The next morning, the couple came back from their trip. I handed them the keys, trying to hide my shaking hands. "How was it?" the husband asked casually. "Fine," I lied. "No problems." But as I turned to leave, I couldn't help myself. "What's in that locked room at the end of the hall?" They exchanged a quick glance. Too quick. "Oh, just storage," the wife said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I left without pressing further. But as I walked away, I glanced back at the house. In the upstairs window, someone was watching me. When I rented the old farmhouse, I thought I'd found a dream deal. It was cheap, had plenty of space, and sat quietly at the edge of the countryside. The landlord only gave me one rule: don't open the door at the end of the upstairs hallway. I laughed at the time, thinking he was joking, but he didn't smile. His face was dead serious. The rule. The door was old, painted white but peeling, with a rusted brass knob. I assumed it was just storage. Maybe the landlord didn't want me snooping in his things. For the first week, I ignored it. I was busy unpacking, fixing up the kitchen, and settling in. But every night, as I walked down the hallway, my eyes would be drawn to that door. I started hearing faint sound behind it. At first, just creaks like it's shifting, then scratching, like fingernails against wood. First attempt. One evening, I decided to test the knob, just to see. It didn't turn, locked tight, but as soon as I touched it, the scratching stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound itself. I pulled my hand back quickly and hurried downstairs, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. Night disturbances. Within days, things escalated. I woke at 2 a.m. to footsteps above my bedroom. The locked room was directly overhead. Slow, deliberate pacing back and forth. I grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs, heart hammering. The hallway was empty. The locked door sat still, silent. But the dust on the floor in front of it was disturbed. 2 clear footprints leading right up to the door. Bare footprints. The whisper. The worst came a week later. I just turned off the lights when I heard it. A whisper, right outside my bedroom door. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The whisper grew louder, though I couldn't make out words. It was like someone murmuring, just low enough to stay hidden. I forced myself up, hands shaking, and cracked my door open. The hallway was empty, except the locked door. It was vibrating slightly, as though someone on the other side was trying not to scream. The dream. That night, I had a dream. In it, I stood in the hallway, staring at the locked door. Slowly it opened just a crack. Inside was a room with no furniture. Just walls covered in claw marks, deep and raw. In the corner stood a figure. Thin, pale, hunched. Its face was blurred, but its mouth stretched wide, whispering my name over and over. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, but the smell of the room lingered in my nostrils, rot and damp wood. Too real for a dream. Breaking point. By now, I couldn't take it anymore. I told myself I needed to know what was inside. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild. Maybe I'd laugh once I saw it was just dusty boxes. I grabbed a hammer from the shed. That night, I stood in front of the locked door, my hands trembling. The scratching had started again, frantic now, almost desperate. I raised the hammer and smashed the knob clean off. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, the air hit me first, thick, stale, choking. I aimed my flashlight inside. The walls were exactly like in my dream. Claw marks, deep gouges, some fresh. But worse was the smell. Metallic, like dry blood. Then I saw something in the corner. A chair, wooden broken, and leather straps nailed into the arms. Straps meant to hold someone down. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. Then the door slammed shut behind me. The figure. Darkness swallowed the room as my flashlight flickered. And then I heard it, breathing. Heavy, ragged, right next to me. I swung the light around wildly. In the corner, the figure from my dream crouched low. Its skin was gray, its limbs too long, its nails dragging along the floor. It tilted its head, and though its face was still blurred, its voice was clear. "Why did you open the door?" The whisper wasn't from its mouth, it was inside my head, rattling around my skull. I bolted for the door, yanking it open with all my strength, and stumbled into the hallway. The figure didn't follow, but as the door slammed shut behind me, I heard it laughing. The landlord. I left the house the next morning. Didn't pack, didn't clean, just left. I confronted the landlord, demanding answers. He stared at me for a long moment before sighing. "My brother," he said quietly. "They locked him in that room years ago. Said he wasn't right, but after he died, nobody could get rid of the room. Every time I try to board it up, the boards rot away." I stared at him, speechless. He just shook his head. "I warned you not to open it." Aftermath. I moved out that same day. But sometimes, even in my new apartment, I wake at night to faint scratching. And I swear I hear a whisper through the walls. "You open the door, now you can't shut it." I took a job in the countryside last summer, working odd shifts for a small farming family. They weren't bad people, but they were distant. The father gave me instructions in short sentences, and the mother rarely spoke at all. The only rule they gave me was this: don't go into the old barn after dark. It sounded strange, but I didn't argue. Farmers can be superstitious, I thought. Every old house has its stories. But rules are always harder to follow when curiosity keeps you awake at night. The first night, the barn stood at the edge of the field, its wood weathered and blackened with age. Unlike the other outbuildings, it leaned slightly to one side like it was trying to collapse but couldn't quite manage it. From the window of the small room they gave me to stay in, I could see the barn directly. On my first night, I noticed something odd. The door moved, just a little, like someone inside had pushed it. But when I looked again, the field was still. No wind, no animals. I shut the curtain and told myself it was nothing. The sounds. By the third night, I couldn't ignore it. I woke to noises, low thumps, dragging sounds, and the unmistakable squeal of wood under pressure. Like something heavy was moving inside the barn. I got up, peered out the window. The door was ajar now, a thin gap of blackness between the planks. I could swear I saw something move inside. Something too tall to be a cow. The farmer's warning. The next morning, I asked the farmer casually, "So, what's in the old barn?" He froze, then muttered, "Nothing. Don't go near it." When I pressed, he snapped. I said nothing. "You hear me? Lock your window if you can't sleep at night." The way he said it made my stomach turn. He wasn't protecting the barn from me. He was protecting me from it. Curiosity. That night, I sat awake, staring at the barn. Around midnight, the noises began again. Louder this time. A dragging, wet sound like something pulling itself across the floor. Then came a sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. A voice. Low, strained, like someone calling from deep inside. "Help!" I pressed my face to the glass, heart pounding. Through the crack in the barn door, Two pale hands gripped the wood from the inside. Thin, trembling, fingers too long. I stumbled back from the window, slamming the curtain shut. But I couldn't sleep. Not after that. Breaking the rule. On the 7th night, I snapped. I told myself maybe someone really was trapped in there. Maybe the farmer was hiding something terrible. I waited until the house was dark, then grabbed the lantern they left me and walked across the field. The air grew colder the closer I got. The grass near the barn was dead, brittle under my boots. The door was shut now, but when I pushed, it groaned open. Inside was pitch black. The smell hit me first, rot, damp, and something metallic like blood left too long. Inside the barn, the beam of my lantern cut through the dark. The barn wasn't empty. Chains hung from the beams, rusted and broken. Deep scratches covered the wooden walls. And in the center, a hole gaped in the ground. Not a neat hole, but torn open, dirt clawed back like something had forced its way up. I heard breathing, slow, ragged, deep. Then, from the shadows at the far end, something unfolded itself. Tall, too tall to be human. Its limbs were wrong, bent, stretched. Its head nearly scraped the rafters. And its face, no, its lack of one, was the worst part. Just smooth skin where eyes and mouth should be. Still, the whisper slid into my head. Help me. The escape. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. The thing took a step forward, the chains on the beams rattling as if stirred by its presence. It reached one long arm toward me, fingers dragging against the floor with a screech. I bolted, slamming the barn door behind me. As I ran, I heard the wood splinter, the door shuddering under a massive blow from inside. I didn't stop until I reached the farmhouse. I locked myself in my room and sat against the door until morning. The family silence. At breakfast, the farmer didn't look at me. Neither did his wife. But his son, maybe 12 years old, kept glancing at me with wide eyes. Finally, he whispered, "You saw it, didn't you?" Before I could answer, his father slammed his fist on the table. Not another word. That was the last meal I ate with them. Leaving. The next day, I packed and left. I didn't ask for wages. I didn't care. As I drove away, I glanced back. The barn door was open again, wide this time. And at the edge of the field, I thought I saw something standing, watching me go. Aftermath. It's been months since then, but sometimes I dream of that faceless figure, the way it whispered in my mind. I can still hear it, faintly, when I wake at night. Help me. But I know better now. It doesn't need help. It needs a way out. I grew up in the city, so moving to the countryside was supposed to be an escape. A slower pace, quiet nights, fresh air. That's what I told myself when I took the job as a caretaker for an isolated farmhouse on the edge of the moors. The rent was practically nothing. My only duty was to keep the place in shape while the owners lived abroad. The landlord left me with one odd warning. If you see the lights on the moor, don't follow them. Just stay inside. I thought he was being poetic or maybe warning me about poachers. I didn't understand until the 3rd night. The first lights. The farmhouse sat in a shallow valley, with rolling fields stretching for miles. From my bedroom window, I could see the moorland rising dark against the horizon. On the 3rd night, just after midnight, I spotted a faint glow out there. At first I thought it was a torch, maybe hikers or locals. But the way it moved was strange. It bobbed in slow circles, then darted a few feet before vanishing. Seconds later, another light appeared, farther to the right. Then 2 more. They hovered above the ground like lanterns carried by invisible hands. I leaned out the window, straining my eyes. That's when I heard it, a faint, high-pitched whistle. Not birds, not wind, almost like a shepherd calling sheep. And then silence. Curiosity. The next morning, I asked the postman about the lights. He stiffened immediately. "You've seen them?" "Then," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "Best stay indoors at night. Folks around here don't talk about it much, but they're not natural." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" "Just swamp gas." "There's no swamp on that moor," he said firmly. Then he drove off. The whistle. 2 nights later, the lights returned. This time closer, just beyond the stone wall that marked the edge of the farmhouse's field. I was standing at the kitchen sink when I saw them. The glow was soft, greenish like foxfire. They floated just above the ground, weaving in and out as if playing. Then the whistling began again. Only this time, it wasn't faint. It was sharp, insistent. A pattern, 3 short bursts, then a long one. Over and over. My heart thudded. I couldn't explain why, but the sound stirred something deep and primal in me, like it wanted me to answer. Without realizing it, I stepped outside. The pool. The air was cold and damp, my breath curling like smoke. The lights pulsed brighter as I approached the stone wall. For a moment, I felt sure I was just witnessing some rare phenomenon, ball lightning, maybe. I lifted my phone to record, but when I did, the lights stopped moving. They hung there, perfectly still, and the whistle grew louder. It was no longer coming from the moor. It was coming from the field, right beside me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just empty grass and the outline of the barn. I ran back inside, bolted the door, and stayed awake until dawn. The old story. The next day, I went into the nearest village and asked about the lights again. Most people shook their heads and walked away. But one elderly farmer finally leaned close and whispered. They call them the shepherd's lights. Been seen for centuries. Folks say they lure you out, make you walk the moor till your legs give out. Some never come back. I asked if it was ghosts. He gave me a look I'll never forget. Not ghosts. Worse, they were the faces of them that vanished. Don't look too long. Don't follow. And for God's sake, don't answer the whistle. The face. That night, the lights came again. This time, one of them drifted right up to the stone wall so close I could see its shape. And there was a shape inside. A face, pale, hollow-eyed, staring straight at me. It looked like my father, who had died 5 years ago. The whistle came again, sharp and urgent. My knees went weak. For one horrible second, I wanted to climb the wall, walk onto the moor, and follow him. Then I slammed the curtains shut and forced myself into bed. I didn't sleep. The knock. At 2 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Not a timid tap. A steady, heavy knock, 3 times in rhythm. I froze. Nobody lived for miles. No cars, no neighbors. Then a voice. Let me in. I knew that voice. It was my father's again. Please, it's cold out here. I wanted to believe it desperately. But I remembered the farmer's words. They were the faces. The knocking grew louder, rattling the old wooden frame. I grabbed a kitchen knife and stood in the hallway until morning light spilled through the windows. When I finally opened the door, the grass was wet with dew, but there were no footprints. The final night, I decided to leave the farmhouse, job or no job. But the owners wouldn't return for weeks, and the only bus didn't run daily. I had to wait until morning. That night, the lights swarmed the field. Dozens of them. They circled the house like fireflies, glowing green and white. The whistling rose to a shriek. It pierced my skull, made me dizzy. I stuffed my ears with tissue, but it didn't help. Then the windows began to glow. The lights were pressing against the glass, faces forming in each one. Men, women, children, all whispering. Come with us. Follow. Out on the moor. The walls creaked as if the house itself was being pulled apart. I hid in the cellar until dawn. Escape. When the first pale light of morning crept in, the whispers stopped. The lights were gone. I didn't even pack. I grabbed my coat, walked the 5 miles to the village, and caught the bus out. The owners still send me emails, asking why I left so suddenly. I don't reply. Sometimes, though, when I'm walking home at night in the city, I see a faint glow in the corner of my eye. And once, I swear I heard the whistle again. 3 short bursts, then a long one. When I first moved to the countryside, I thought I had found peace. The farmhouse I rented was old, a little crooked, but charming in its way. The air smelled of grass and wood smoke, and the only sound at night was the wind brushing through the hedgerows. But across from the house, beyond a narrow dirt lane, stretched a wide, empty field. The villagers had warned me. That field isn't right. Nothing grows there. Best leave it alone. I thought they were being superstitious. After all, every small town has its ghost stories. I didn't take them seriously until the field began to change. The first week was uneventful. I unpacked, fixed some leaky pipes, and explored the footpaths that cut through the countryside. But one night, just before bed, I glanced out the window and froze. Something was standing in the middle of the field. At first, I thought it was a scarecrow. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched. But there had been no scarecrow there the day before. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The shape was still there. I turned off the bedroom light and stared into the dark. The figure didn't move. I finally convinced myself it was a trick of the moonlight, some strange angle of the hedges and grass. But the next morning, when I checked, there was nothing in the field. The stench. A few nights later, I woke up to a smell, thick, rancid like rotting meat. It was so strong it made me gag. I stumbled to the window, searching for the source. And there it was again, the figure standing in the field. This time closer. The moonlight revealed more detail. Its arms were too long, almost reaching its knees. Its head was lopsided, as if broken at the neck. I shut the curtains and forced myself back into bed, but the stench lingered all night. The farmer's warning. The next day, I asked the village shopkeeper about the field. His face went pale. "You've seen it then," he said quietly. "Seen what?" I pressed. He lowered his voice. "They say something lives under that soil. Long ago, before the war, they tried to plow it. The horses went mad, the earth bled, and the farmer never came back. They buried the field, left it fallow. But it doesn't stay empty." I laughed nervously, but he didn't join me. He just shook his head and muttered, "Don't watch it. Don't let it see you watching." The knock on glass. That night, I kept every curtain closed. I told myself I wouldn't look. But around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the downstairs kitchen window. My stomach dropped. The kitchen faced the field. I crept halfway down the stairs and froze. The stench was back, stronger than ever. Then another knock. Slow, deliberate. Not an animal. Not the wind. I couldn't bring myself to go closer. I stayed frozen on the stairs until the sound stopped. When the sun rose, I finally checked the glass. There were 3 long, greasy smears across the pane. Like fingers. The movement. By the end of the month, I was barely sleeping. The figure came every few nights. Sometimes it stood at the far edge of the field. Sometimes closer. Once I saw it move. It didn't walk. It lurched, jerking forward in bursts as if pulled by strings. Each movement was wrong. Too sharp, too fast. And every time it appeared, the smell followed. I tried calling the landlord to complain, but he laughed it off. That old field? Ignore it. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. The dream. One night, I dreamed I was standing in the field. The soil was black and soft, sinking under my feet. The figure stood inches away, towering over me. Its skin was gray and blistered. Its mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. Then it raised a hand and touched my face. The skin burned like acid. I jolted awake, heart hammering. But when I looked in the mirror the next morning, there was a faint red mark across my cheek. The digging. The following evening, I heard a new sound, scraping. It was coming from the field, steady and rhythmic, like claws raking through dirt. I forced myself to peek through the curtain. The figure was on its knees, tearing at the soil with its hands. I could see chunks of earth flying aside. And then I saw what it was unearthing. A pale hand. Human. Limp. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. When I looked again, the figure was staring straight at me. Even from across the lane, I felt its gaze pin me in place. I slammed the curtains shut, shaking. The visitor. At 3 a.m., the knocking returned. Louder, harder. Every window in the house shook. Then a voice. A wet, gurgling whisper. "Come out." I pressed my hands over my ears, but I still heard it, inside my head. "Come out." I ran upstairs, hid under the covers like a child. The stench filled the room, choking me. When I finally dared to look, the bedroom window was glowing faintly. Something was pressed against it. A face. Gray. Rotting. Eyes sunk deep. Mouth stretched too wide. And then it smiled. The escape. I left at dawn. Didn't pack, didn't lock up. I just ran down the lane to the bus stop and never looked back. The villagers weren't surprised. They only nodded when I told them where I'd been living. "It doesn't let people stay long," one said quietly. "I live in the city again now. Crowded streets, bright lights, endless noise. It should feel safe. But sometimes when I pass an empty lot or a patch of bare earth, I smell it again. That same rancid stench. And every so often, out of the corner of my eye, I see a tall, broken shape standing in the distance, watching. When my aunt passed away, she left me her cottage in the countryside. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a sagging roof, but it was free and I needed a fresh start. The villagers called it the Edge House because it sat right where the fields gave way to dense, sprawling woods. The place was peaceful during the day. Birds chirped, sunlight streamed through the trees, and deer grazed at the forest's edge. But at night, the woods changed. The air grew still, too still, and the trees seemed to lean closer, like they were listening. I thought it was my imagination, until the knocking started. The first night I stayed there. I kept the windows open for fresh air. Around midnight, I woke to a sound. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't at the door, it was on the wall, the side facing the woods. I held my breath, straining to listen. The knocks came again, slow and deliberate, as though someone was rapping their knuckles against the wooden boards. I forced myself to get up and look outside. The moonlight revealed only trees, endless and silent. No movement, no person. I told myself it was a branch hitting the wall. But when I checked in the morning, there were 3 perfect indentations on the wood. The whistling. The next night, I woke again. This time, not to knocking, but to whistling. It was soft, almost like a lullaby, drifting in from the trees. The tune was slow and strange, with no rhythm I recognized. I pulled the curtain shut, but the sound didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder, circling the cottage. I sat on the edge of the bed until dawn, too afraid to move. When the sun rose, the whistling stopped. The villager's story. The following day, I asked an old man in the village about it. His eyes darkened. "That cottage, it's too close," he muttered. "Too close to what?" I asked. "The wood. People say there's something in there, something that calls to you. First the knocking, then the whistling. Don't answer it. Don't step outside at night." I laughed nervously, but he grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "You hear it again? You keep still. Don't you dare answer back." The voice. A week passed before it returned. This time, it wasn't whistling. It was a voice. Soft, low, almost kind. "Come out." The words drifted through the cracks of the window, carried by the night air. "Come out, we've been waiting." My blood ran cold. I stayed frozen in bed, clutching the blanket to my chest. The voice circled the house, calling from different directions, always close, always just outside. Then, from the front door, 3 knocks. Slow, heavy. I pressed my hands to my ears, but I still heard it. The voice wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside my head. The shape at the window. The next night, I made the mistake of looking. The voice came again, calling softly. Against my better judgment, I crept to the window and peeled back the curtain. Something stood at the tree line. Tall, thin, with arms too long for its body. Its head was tilted back, and though the moonlight was faint, I could see its mouth stretched wide, moving as it called my name. I let the curtain drop, heart hammering in my chest. But the voice didn't stop. The hand. A storm rolled in 2 nights later. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder shook the walls. I thought the noise would drown out everything else. But sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of the door handle turning. Slowly, carefully. Then, fingers slipped through the gap of the window frame beside the bed. Pale, bony fingers wet from the rain, curling against the glass. I bolted upright, grabbed the nearest thing I could, a lamp, and smashed it against the wall. The fingers slipped back into the night. The sleepwalking. I started locking everything, doors, windows, even the cupboard drawers. But then I woke one morning to find the front door wide open. Mud streaked the floor, leading out into the woods. And the worst part? My own footprints were in it. I didn't remember leaving. I didn't remember anything. But I knew, deep in my bones, that it hadn't just been me. Something had led me outside. The final night. The last night I spent there. The voice was louder than ever. "Come out." The knocking shook the walls. The whistling pierced my ears. And then silence. I thought it was over until I heard breathing. Inside the room, I turned slowly. In the corner by the wardrobe, something stood. A shadow darker than the night, tall and twisted. Its mouth hung open, and though no sound came out, I knew it was the one that had been calling me. I shut my eyes and prayed. When I opened them again, the corner was empty. but the smell of damp earth lingered. Aftermath. I left the cottage the next morning. Didn't pack, didn't look back. I handed the keys to the solicitor and told him to sell it, burn it, whatever he wanted, just not to me. Back in the city, I thought I'd escaped. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I still hear it. A soft knock, a low whistle, and a voice, gentle as ever. Come out. I took the night job at the storage place because the ad said, no customers after 10 p.m., easy money, sit in a warm office and watch cameras. It was on Craigslist, of course. I've been doing gig work for months. Junk hauling, moving couches, delivering mattresses up 3 flights of stairs for $40 and a pullback. A quiet overnight with coffee and a paycheck sounded like a miracle. The manager interviewed me at noon on a Wednesday. He was one of those guys who looked tired in the bones, salt and pepper stubble, wind-burned cheeks, Carhartt jacket with an oil stain that had its own history. He walked me through the tiny office, the bathroom with a mop in the sink, the wall of monitors. 10 cameras covered the lanes between the rows of corrugated roll-up doors, 2 on the front gate, 1 on the office door, 1 on the dumpster. Mostly you'll sit here, he said, tapping the desk. Gate locks at 10. You don't open it for nobody after that. If someone gets stuck inside, call me and I'll call them. You don't go walkabout unless there's smoke or blood. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. He didn't laugh. He slid a laminated card across the desk. Overnight procedures. Halfway down, in bold, do not approach Unit 43. Do not interact with occupant. Manager only. You have a problem, Unit? I asked. Every place is one, he said. Most nights it's quiet. You keep notes. Use the radio if you need me. Don't open the office door for anybody. Seriously, nobody. He handed me 2 keys on a ring. 1 for the front door of the office, 1 for the breaker panel. If there's a power dip, hit the reset, bottom right. Cameras will reboot in under a minute. If it's longer than that, call me. I signed a W-9 that smelled faintly like diesel and started the following night. The first half of my first shift was peaceful in the way only cold places can be. It was late fall, breath fogged when I stepped outside to smoke. The metal rows stretched away like identical alleys in both directions, numbers stenciled in black. 17, 18, 19. Each lane had those motion-sensing lights that pop on a beat after you've already scared yourself. I drank coffee from the donated machine, answered 2 calls, 1 wrong number, 1 late payer trying to haggle with a voicemail, and scanned the monitors because that's what I was being paid for, to notice nothing. Around 1:12 a.m., a small notification slid onto the screen, motion detected, lane C. I brought up the camera and saw a raccoon hustling past, bands of light striping its back. It stopped to look up at the lens like it knew me personally, then waddled on. At 2:27 a.m., the notification returned, motion detected, lane D. The camera showed the mouth of the far lane, units 41 through 50 on one side, 31 through 40 on the other. The sodium lamp at the end flickered, buzzing. At 2:28 a.m., the buzzer on the desk chirped. Overhead door sensor, 43. I leaned closer. Unit 43's roll-up door sat in the center of the row, perfectly shut, disc lock hanging undisturbed through the hasp. The buzzer chirped again, then again. Overhead door, 43. Overhead door, 43. I picked up the radio. I'm getting a sensor on 43, I said, trying to sound like I did this all the time. Static. Then the manager's voice, hoarse with sleep. Copy. Do not approach. Is the lock intact? Looks like it. I squinted at the grainy image. Yeah, it's there. Nobody in the lane. He exhaled into the mic, log it. If the sensor continues, I'll call the renter in the morning. It says occupant on the sheet, I said, glancing at the laminated card. Not renter. A pause. Log it, he said, and the radio clicked dead. The sensor chirped 3 more times over the next half hour, then stopped. I wrote it in the log the way I was supposed to. 2:27 to 3:05. Unit 43 overhead door sensor intermittent. No visual disturbance. Lock intact. Then I forced myself to switch the monitor back to the gate and watch the empty road. I told myself buildings settle. Springs flex when the temperature drops. Electronics hiccup. I told myself a lot of things. On my second night, I brought a paperback and didn't open it once. The monitor window for Lane D sat in the corner of the screen like an itch. At 3:12 a.m., the overhead light at the end of the lane buzzed into a brighter home. The camera auto-iris pinched down a hair. Nothing moved. The buzzer chirped. Overhead door, 43. I left it up on the screen. The door didn't quiver, didn't tremble, didn't do anything. And yet the panel chirped again and again in an even rhythm, a metronome. I picked up the radio and set it down without pressing the button. The laminated card stared at me from under my coffee mug. At 3:27 a.m., the office phone rang. I stared at it for a second like a stupid person in a movie and then picked up. Storage office. A man's voice. You're not supposed to look. Calm. Not a question. The line crackled like a long run of wire. Sir, you're not supposed to watch when it wants to come up, the voice said, mild as weather. It takes time when you watch. I looked at the caller ID. Unit 43. The system labeled internal calls by unit. I didn't even know units could call the office. Who is this? I asked and hated the wobble in my voice. You're new, the voice said, almost kindly. They should tell you to turn the screen off. Manager told me not to approach, I said. He didn't say. You'll learn, the voice said, and the line went dead. The buzzer stopped. The light at the end of Lane D went back to its previous hum, as if it had been holding its breath and finally remembered how to breathe. I called the manager. He answered on the first ring. Yeah, somebody just called from 43, I said. Said I shouldn't watch. He was quiet long enough to make me hear the room around me. The click of the refrigerator cycling on, the soft hiss of the HVAC, the bristle of my own jacket sleeve when I shifted. Log the call, he said. Don't answer if they ring again. He didn't respond. I wrote 3:27. Incoming call labeled Unit 43. Male voice. Statement. You're not supposed to look, and left a little space after it like I expected to add something. The lines below it were blank. I should have quit that night. I didn't. Rent was due. The third shift the wind picked up. The cameras showed trash scudding along the lanes. The corner of a Craigslist free sign, a styrofoam container that bumped the roll of 39 and paused like it had decided to live there. The gate cameras shimmered with a light mist. Visibility dropped. Every so often I had to tap a key to keep the monitors from dimming. At 1:09 a.m., the power bounced. The monitors went black. The room went silent. And for a second all I could hear was the wind outside, pulling at the office door like a polite thief. Then the emergency lights clicked on and bathed everything in dirty orange. The UPS under the desk screamed a long beep. I grabbed the key for the breaker panel and went into the hallway. The panel was in a closet behind the Coke machine, which I had to shoulder aside an inch to get the door open. The toggles were labeled in a hand I couldn't read. I scanned for the one he'd mentioned, lower right, and found a breaker someone had tagged with red nail polish. I flipped it off and on. The monitors in the office blinked awake one by one, cameras rejoining the world. The gate returned. The dumpster. Lane A, B, C. Lane D came last. The monitor showed a picture for a second that wasn't my storage place. A long hallway lit by buzzing fluorescents, floor gleaming faintly like somebody had mopped 100 years ago and the water never dried. On both sides, doors without numbers. The image flickered, tore diagonally like a tape someone had creased, and then Lane D snapped back into place. Roll-up doors, concrete, a stray leaf trembling as the wind tried to teach it to fly. The buzzer chirped. Overhead door, 43. I stood up so fast the chair clattered on the linoleum. I scanned the lanes, looking for anything else anomalous, anything I could blame. The rest of the place looked exactly like it always looked, like storage, blank and patient. I shouldn't have gone out there. I know that now. But people do small, stupid things because they think they're still in charge of themselves. I took the heavy flashlight from the hook and stepped into the night. The air smelled like wet metal. The wind scraped past and made the rows of doors ripple with quiet groans, each breathing in its own way. When I rounded into Lane D, the motion light popped and bathed everything in a sickly yellow. Unit 43 sat 10 doors down. The disc lock hung in its hasp like an ornament. The buzzer chirped again inside the office I'd left, faint enough to sound like a bird. I crossed half the distance before I made myself stop. That's when I felt it, the tiniest pressure change like an elevator starting. The hair on my forearms lifted. My ears clicked. "Don't look," someone said behind me, not loud, not close. An ordinary voice, maybe 10 feet away. I turned. The lane was empty. Wind combed the water on the asphalt in small silvery fingers. The light at the end of the road buzzed, like it had fever. I backed away slowly, flashlight down, trying to make my body language look polite to whatever might be watching. When I reached the end of the lane, I made the mistake of aiming the beam at the numbers over the doors, counting backward like a kid learning to subtract. 50, 49, 48. At 43, the beam hit the corrugations and slid up, catching the lip of the roll and the tiny gap where the door sits in the track. It wasn't much, an eyelash's width, but blackness pressed at it like a held breath on the other side. Not shadow, not night, inside. Something tapped the door from within. Not a bang, not a fist, just a fingertip testing the skin of the world. Tap, tap, tap. "Okay," I said out loud to no one. Okay, and I walked backward up the lane until I could turn and jog without feeling like I'd be grabbed. In the office, I shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and slid the long aluminum bar into its brackets because there wasn't a procedure for don't panic, but there should have been. I sat down and opened the log, and my hands shook so much the letters looked drunk. 148, power dip. Reset. Camera D lane briefly displayed unknown corridor. Sensor 43. I stopped there, not because I ran out of ink, but because I ran out of language I wanted to put somewhere official. The office phone rang. I stared at it and let it ring. It rang 8 times and stopped. It rang again. Caller ID, Unit 43. "You're not supposed to look," the man's voice said when I didn't speak. The line sounded wetter now, metal amplifying metal. "It takes longer when you look." What takes longer? I heard myself ask. The manager's radio crackled on the desk. No button pressed, no call initiated. And I heard his voice come through from wherever he was sleeping. "Leave the line. Hang up. Don't." The radio went static. The office lights dimmed a fraction, just enough to make the shadows in the corners take a step. "Tomorrow the lock will be different," the voice said pleasantly. "You'll think someone changed it. You'll be right. Don't try yours. Your key won't fit anymore." I hung up. I unplugged the phone. I sat there with my hand on the cord like a person trying to believe in a simpler cause and effect. At 4:06 a.m., the wind died like someone put a lid on the sky. The storage place went suddenly very quiet. The buzzer didn't chirp. The monitors didn't flicker. I waited for dawn like kids wait for Christmas. I told the manager I quit as soon as he walked in. He didn't argue. He took back the keys, signed my timesheet, and said, "I'll mail you the check." I had one foot out the door when he said, "If anybody from a unit ever calls you at night, you log it. You don't answer questions. You don't give your name. You don't take theirs. You don't schedule moves. You don't promise anything. In general," I asked, stupid with lack of sleep. "In general," he said, and looked past me at the monitors like the place was a living thing that could be offended. Especially 43. I walked the half mile to the bus stop and watched the rose recede behind me. Everything silvered with the leftover mist. From that distance, the place looked reasonable, anonymous, boring, like a miniature city built by someone who was more practical than imaginative. 2 days later, an invoice arrived in my email. "Thank you for renting unit number 43. It was addressed to me, my full name spelled correctly, with a prorated amount due in a note. Lock changed at occupant request. At the bottom, in small print, access code, blank. I drove back to the office and found the door locked. Lights off, a piece of paper taped up, closed for maintenance. I pounded until my hand hurt. No one answered. I called the main number. It went to a recording. I left a message that started professional and ended sounding like a person arguing with their own reflection. Nobody called back. That night, in my apartment, I woke at 3:12 a.m. with the kind of certainty that makes you sit up before you know why. My phone screen glowed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. I turned it face down and pressed the pillow over my head. On the 4th try, I answered because people do small, stupid things even when they know better. You don't have to watch anymore, the man's voice said. Not through the speaker, inside my ear, as if the phone had become nothing but a tunnel. We'll be up soon. I hung up. I powered the phone off. I pulled a chair in front of my apartment's closet door because it rolled on cheap tracks that never quite seated, and because the metal it was made of looked too much like a roll-up. At 3:27 a.m., something tapped the closet from inside. Not a bang, a fingertip. Tap, tap, tap. In the morning, when I opened it, the cardboard boxes and winter coats and vacuum were exactly as I left them, except my ring of keys lay on top of the coats, and there was a disc lock on the ring I'd never seen before. Heavy, brand new, still tacky from its packaging glue. Someone had written a number on its edge in black marker, 43. I threw it out. I carried it to the dumpster behind the building and pitched it in and listened for it to hit bottom. It clanged and kept going like it found a deeper place to fall than gravity knows. The next day, the lock sat on my kitchen table. I didn't put it there. I'm writing this because when you see a Craigslist ad for a night guard or a facility attendant or an easy sit and watch the monitor's job, maybe you'll remember some stranger's story and scroll past. You'll tell yourself it's because the pay is low or the drive is long. You won't have to say it's because you have started to understand the shape of some rules. Don't open the door after 10. Don't answer the phone when unit calls. Don't look at the one you've been told not to look at. At night now, I sleep with the TV on, not because it makes me less alone, but because the low voices make it harder to hear the other voice when it comes. I keep a towel wedged along the crack of the closet door like that will matter. And every few nights at 3:12, the phone lights the dark with an unknown I recognize the way you recognize your own face. Sometimes I answer, sometimes I don't. Either way, every now and then, from somewhere very close, something taps the thin skin of the world. Tap, tap, tap. The invoice in my email still shows a balance due. The access code line is still blank. The Pay Now button works. I haven't clicked it. I don't want to know what it buys.